and he only got back into the cabin with the help of Joe Lawton. And the story's in the book, and the story is on a audio which I was going to show you, I was going to run for you, and we might run that at the end of the sequence rather than now, because I'm not sure that we could get back to where we started. The result was that this is the picture on the right, is the aeroplane after they had successfully landed at a place called Newmarket. Newmarket is the same place where it's a famous racecourse to this day, and they chose that because it had a longer runway than anywhere else. And at this stage, the bomb doors were open, there was no brakes, and the thing that Widdowson had to do was keep the aeroplane flying, and particularly keep the engines going. The propellers had no auto feathering, or no feathering at all, so it was important, if you could, to keep them going. So the normal routine after they landed was to retrieve the crew from wherever they were, in this case Newmarket. The entire staff of Newmarket were paraded the next day to look at this aeroplane because of the mess that it was in. And 2 weeks later, I just need to go back, so I've got my notes here. Back at Feltwell, the crew debrief was attended by CO-75 Squadron, who had the job of deciding who merited awards. He decided a Distinguished Flying Cross for Widdowson, the captain, and a Distinguished Flying Medal for Sergeant Alan Box, who was the rear gunner. Those were awarded immediately, but the recommendation for Jimmy for a Victoria Cross took 21 days and went through the awards committee and whatever that involved. So the result was, what we saw on the next slide, see this, is that Jimmy Ward was staying with his brother at Teddington, in just out south of London, and the base commander, or the station commander, Buckley, Morris Buckley, sent Jimmy Ward this telegram. So I'll let you read it. On the way back from London back to the station, Jimmy stayed in London, and among those he met was Peter Lane's father, Brian Lane, and this was at the Forces Club. We decided at the Forces Club. Brian Lane was a pilot in Coastal Command, and thanks to Peter's assistance in proofreading the book, Brian Lane's diary entry is mentioned in the book. Jimmy arrived at Mildenhall Station to a hero's welcome. So the VC was announced, he was taken off operations, and it became public property and instantly a celebrity. He was wined and dined and was in the company of celebrities like Noel Coward, and for 6 weeks this became his life. Back in New Zealand, the news was broken by the BBC World Service, and this was the noon news. Here is the news, and this is Alva Liddell reading it. This is how the news was read, and the reason for that was that there was a whole host of people around the world purporting to be not who they were, with odd news or misinformation. The Ward family heard the news via the family doctor, and they experienced the same celebrity status with a similar deluge of mail. In the book, Jimmy has lots of commentary on the poor delivery of mail. That was the job of the New Zealand High Commission or New Zealand House to collect mail, find out where the troops were, and then send it on. Picture on the right is one of the things that Victoria Cross recipients end up getting done, and that is sitting for a portrait. So 6 sittings, take your gear, and that's the picture. That picture exists and was gifted to New Zealand and is still in New Zealand, and currently at the RNZAF Hākia Officers Mess. Bottom right is Jimmy Ward's dad. This is Percy Ward, the guy that had the story about Hitler and his mates and the Coventry Spire. So the story, the congratulations went on, staging was done for PR purposes, and this is the Willison's crew with Jimmy in their box here, and Mason, the radio operator. The Ford gunner was injured and wasn't available for the photos. So this is another piece of news, and we'll try this one. No, it's not working either. Work fine today. So after the hullabaloo of celebrity status, Jimmy was made a captain, and the crew that he crewed up with were restored to him, and he was back on operations by September. At this stage he was running up to 300 hours of flying in the year that he had accumulated since he started, and on a raid to Hamburg, which was a city in Germany renowned for building ships. Two aircraft took off from 75 Squadron, and no, of the aircraft that took off, 2 failed to return. So 2 Wellingtons and their crews simply disappeared, and they weren't seen again in the UK. FTR meant a sequence of missing in action messages was sent to the RNZAF and the next of kin of both crews. I talked about fortress over without a roof. The effects of Bomber Command's bombing campaign was epitomised by Albert Speer 15 years after the war, when he said, "No one had yet seen, this was the greatest lost battle in the German side, where thousands of troops, thousands of anti-aircraft guns were produced and ammunition stockpiled, and essentially took those troops away from the front." That was one of the primary reasons for the Bomber Command campaign to proceed. But the cost was high. I said it was noisy, dark and dangerous. And the danger meant that 57,000 aircrew were killed, 8,400 were wounded, 9,000 were made prisoners of war, and that was a price that our previous generation paid to bring the Germans to heel. So agonisingly, there was no news of his fate for over a year. Jimmy's brother Harold got a reply to numerous letters he'd sent to New Zealand to British prisoners of war, and Pete Peterson, who was Jimmy's navigator, recorded the tragedy. Essentially, his aircraft had been shot down, returning from the target. Two of the crew had survived, and Jimmy and 3 others had perished. Jimmy wasn't coming home, and New Zealand missed hailing its first Victoria Cross recipient of World War II. It took 2 years before his remains were found and his family was advised. Jimmy's remains lie with his crew in Ohlsdorf Cemetery in Hamburg, and this is a picture of Glenn Turner, who Alan will know well, an RNZAF senior NCO, who's now the 75 Squadron Association Secretary, and makes it his business to look out for 75 Squadron people, including Jimmy Ward, whose grave is pictured here. Jimmy's just running through quickly now. Jimmy's remembered in the UK, in the RAF church in London, St Clement Danes. All the recipients of Victoria Crosses and George Crosses are listed, and Jimmy's listed on the left-hand panel. In the UK is also there's a pub called the Wellington in Fatwell. It's got a memorial wall. In of the 3A pilots training course, Fraser Barron became a wing commander and was decorated with a DSO and bar, a DFC and a DFM, and was named Bomber Baron, and it was CO of 7 Squadron. And his story, which includes a mention of Jimmy Ward, was written and is one of the books I've got on the rack here. So Baron had become a casualty, Ward had become a casualty, Jim Starkey survived, and he was he represented the 3A pilots training course in the Victory Parade in 1946. Others were Bob Watson, who's in the front row, Group Captain Bob Watson, and I remember seeing him in my own time in the Air Force. The histories of the world of Jimmy Ward and who he knew and who were his commanders was thanks to By Such Deeds, a book, a large book at the end by Colin Hanson, and For Your Tomorrow by Errol Martin. These men have done biographies of everyone who was given an award and everyone who was a casualty. It's a remarkable book. So Jimmy's legacy for New Zealand was the first VC awarded to a New Zealand airman, and these are the other 2. 75 Squadron, 75 New Zealand Squadron became 75 Squadron RNZAF that we know from Ahakia, and with it, the reverse transfer as a result of the gifting of the aeroplanes in 1940 meant that the battle honours from 1916 right up to 1946 all feature on the squadron standard that's shown in that picture. Jimmy Ward is remembered in New Zealand in a number of places. I particularly like the Roll of Honour at the Air Force Museum, and that lists all men and women who died in the service of the RNZAF in war and peace. At the bottom left, Jimmy Ward is painting of him. A picture of him is paraded each Anzac Day by the school that Jimmy attended. In the middle, and sort of an effigy, it's a photographic image, stands about that high, it's supposed to be real height, was developed in a series of them for men and women who were part of the history of the RNZAF, and that is at the Air Force Museum of New Zealand. One of the interesting things I talked about, the Logbook Connections, and in the logbook we found Flight Lieutenant letter I talked about before, but we also found that NZ 744 actually still exists. It exists now as ZKAJP and is still alive and well in Napier. Classic Flyers has a special place for 75 Squadron and Jimmy Ward, and Alan Reynolds, who's here tonight, was the architect of a major display which you're free to visit tonight. That includes Jimmy Ward and a replica VC and his list of medals. And last slide, Courage Aflame by Bob Moore is the culmination of work that he started in 1983. He was a school teacher and was a master at Wanganui Boys College, and the college had renamed their assembly hall the Jimmy Ward Memorial Hall, and nobody knew what it was about, so he set about correcting that, and the fallout of that was somebody said to him, in fact it was Fred Lucas, who I mentioned before, said, Bob, you've got a job, and that's to write a biography. So that is available tonight. Recommended retail price is $69, and we've got a special just for tonight. We're not set up for FPOS. We'll take cash or you could pay by direct credit if you choose. So we're at the end and hopefully in my address I've succeeded in giving you an insight into the world Jimmy knew it well, and something of the challenges he and his fellow aircrew experienced on operations, and the lives endured by him and his peers that they encountered every day. The ongoing losses of entire crews must have been harrowing, not to mention the anxiety for their families. From my reading of Jimmy Ward, he never set out to be famous, and he faced fame with the same courage he faced in attempting to put out the fire on the wing of his Wellington with all his might. That concludes my lecture. It's gone on longer than I'd anticipated, and the gadgets didn't work, so we'll conclude at this stage, and I'll invite Jack to take the chair again.
Thank you very much, Des. That was quite a topic you were tackling there, and it was a very wide-ranging discussion. And so on behalf of everybody, I'm thanking you. I didn't know all those facts about Sergeant Ward. I did learn about him when I was doing my service in the Air Force. It was compulsory, part of compulsory training, I think, in the background of our service. People learned about some of the more famous of our forebears and runners. But it was interesting that he set out to be a school teacher, and he wound up doing the very brave things that he did, which was a reflection of his whole cohort, really, of young men and women of the day. And it's a sad thing that he didn't survive very long after his most famous exploit there, where he was where he won the Victoria Cross for that brave attempt to put the fire out. And I think one of the things that led to his crew being able to survive that event was purely because it was a Wellington with its geodetic construction. An uncle of mine was a tail gunner in those same aircraft, and he was based in Malta, and on 3 consecutive landings on arrival back at Malta from sorties over Italy, the tail section broke off on touchdown, and he was left down the approach end of the runway, and the rest of the aircraft, and that happened 3 consecutive times. So it got them back, it got them down. There were a lot of survivors. My uncle suffered from a very serious stutter all his remaining life. And anyway, the fact that they had such, in 1941 and leading up to then, they had such primitive navigation, and they spent most of the time not knowing where they were, and certainly not being able to bomb accurately. It was all part of Churchill's efforts to encourage people to support the war, you know, that caused all those night raids, and why the RAF turned to night raid bombing. So we've had a quick look at what went on in the background, and it was very enlightening, and thank you, Des. That must have been quite some job putting that all together. So again, would you please thank Des in the usual way. And you're aware about the book sales. The raffle will be drawn to get a winner, and we've got the light supper gold coin required, please, for the supper available. And you're all most welcome to visit the 75 Squadron exhibit downstairs. So if you wish to have the raffle drawn.
I'll ask the Mayor to take one ticket out, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'm going to prolong the agony here. So this is for 3rd prize. Thank you.
Okay. Also, if you've got your ticket available, you'll need the stuff to get the right number.